Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something pretty interesting, the possible impact of PFAS on our brains. You know, those forever chemicals we keep hearing about.
Yeah.
You sent over some really fascinating research from the University at Buffalo, along with a news article that sums it all up.
Right.
So by the end of this deep dive, we'll all understand what the study found and what it means for us.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
For a long time, scientists have suspected that these chemicals, which are basically everywhere, might be affecting our brains.
Right.
And now this study offers some pretty compelling evidence on a molecular level to back up those suspicions.
I was definitely surprised by just how much these chemicals can actually mess with our brain function.
Yeah.
But before we really get into it, let's do a quick recap of what PFAS are and why they're such a big concern.
Okay, sure.
You got it.
PFAS are a huge group of synthetic chemicals, thousands of them actually, that are used in everything,
Wow.
from nonstick cookware to firefighting foam, because of their ability to repel water and oil.
Yeah, makes sense.
The problem is they're incredibly stable,
Oh.
meaning they don't break down in the environment,
Oh, right.
hence the nickname forever chemicals.
Right.
They can linger for decades, even centuries.
And of course, they don't just stay in the environment, right?
Exactly.
They can build up in our bodies, too.
Exactly. We're exposed to them through various sources, including drinking water, food packaging, and even contaminated soil.
Right.
And once they're in our system, they can stick around for a long time.
Yeah.
This new study, however, focuses on a particularly troubling aspect: their ability to cross the blood-brain barrier,
Right.
which is supposed to protect our brains from harmful substances and accumulate in brain tissue.
That's the part that really caught my attention.
Yeah.
What surprised you most about the study's findings?
I think what struck me the most was the sheer scale of the impact.
Oh, wow.
The researchers looked at how different types of PFAS affected gene expression in cells that mimic the behavior of neurons in the brain.
Okay.
And what they discovered was pretty alarming.
Oh.
Even at low concentrations, some PFAS caused noticeable changes in how these cells express certain genes, essentially altering the way our brains function at a fundamental level.
So these chemicals aren't just hanging out in our brains, they're actually messing with our genetic code.
Yeah, and the implications of that are quite significant.
I bet.
Think about it. Genes are like instruction manuals that tell our cells how to function,
Right.
dictating everything from cell growth and development to communication between neurons.
Okay.
So if PFAS are altering gene expression, it means they could be disrupting these crucial processes, potentially leading to various problems, including cognitive decline, memory issues, and even neurodevelopmental disorders.
That is definitely unsettling.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the researchers tested different types of PFAS.
Right.
Did they all have the same effect?
That's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
They tested 6 different types of PFAS. And while they all had some impact, the severity varied depending on the specific chemical structure.
Gotcha.
One of the most striking findings was that perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFOA, seemed to be the biggest culprit,
Oh, okay.
altering the activity of nearly 600 genes.
Wow, 600.
Yeah,
PFOA, that sounds familiar. Wasn't that commonly used in nonstick cookware?
you got it.
Okay.
PFOA was widely used in various products for decades, but the EPA recently classified it as hazardous
Right.
due to its persistence and potential health risks.
Makes sense.
And this study found that even at low concentrations, it had the most significant impact on gene expression.
Wow.
Interestingly, some of the genes affected are those involved in synaptic growth and neural function,
Right.
which are critical for things like learning and memory.
So it sounds like different PFAS have different levels of badness, so to speak.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's why studying each PFAS individually is crucial.
Yeah.
In fact, they also found 11 genes that were consistently affected by all the types of PFAS tested,
Oh.
suggesting these genes could be used as biomarkers for monitoring PFAS-induced neurotoxicity.
Okay, so biomarkers.
Yeah.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not exactly sure what it means in this context.
Yes. So think of biomarkers like red flags that can alert us to potential damage caused by PFAS in the brain.
Gotcha.
That's like having an early warning system.
So we're not just talking about identifying the problem,
Right.
but also tracking it over time.
Exactly.
It seems like this research has opened up some new possibilities.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about these 11 genes and why this discovery is so important?
Of course, these 11 genes are particularly intriguing
Okay.
because they provide a universal signal of PFAS exposure, regardless of the specific type.
Interesting.
This consistency across different PFAS suggests they might be key players in how these chemicals affect our brains.
That makes sense. So tell us,
Yeah.
what do these genes actually do?
Well, one of the genes that was consistently downregulated, meaning its activity was reduced, is called mesencephalic astrocyte-derived neurotrophic factor.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
But essentially, this gene plays a crucial role in keeping brain cells healthy and functioning correctly.
Okay.
In fact, studies have shown that increasing the activity of this gene can even reverse symptoms of neurodegenerative diseases in rats.
So the fact that PFAS are suppressing this gene's activity is a major red flag.
Precisely, it suggests that exposure to these chemicals could be hindering the brain's natural ability to protect and repair itself, potentially increasing the risk of long-term damage.
That's definitely concerning. Did the researchers find any genes that were consistently upregulated by PFAS exposure?
Yes, one that stood out was thioredoxin-interacting protein, which has been linked to neuronal cell death.
Oh, no.
This means that exposure to PFAS could be tipping the balance towards cell death in the brain, possibly contributing to neurodegeneration over time.
Okay, that's starting to paint a pretty worrisome picture. We've got these forever chemicals building up in our brains, messing with our genes, potentially increasing the risk of cognitive decline and even neurodegenerative diseases.
Right.
It's a lot to take in. What are your thoughts on all of this?
I understand the concern. It's important to remember that this is a relatively new area of research, and we still have a lot to learn about the long-term impacts of PFAS exposure.
I see.
However, this study provides some crucial insights that should guide our actions moving forward.
So what can we do, knowing these chemicals are so widespread? Is it even possible to avoid them entirely?
Complete avoidance is admittedly difficult,
Yeah.
given how deeply embedded PFAS are in our environment and consumer products.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we're powerless.
Okay.
Knowledge is power. And this study arms us with the information we need to make informed choices and minimize our exposure.
That's reassuring. What are some practical steps we can take to protect ourselves and our families?
One of the most effective things you can do is filter your drinking water.
Okay.
Many PFAS can be removed with a good quality water filter, especially those certified to remove PFAS.
That makes sense.
You can also be mindful of the food you eat,
Okay.
choosing organic produce and meats whenever possible,
Right.
and avoiding greasy or processed foods that often come in PFAS-laden packaging.
So reading food labels and being aware of where our food comes from is key?
Absolutely. Another area to focus on is cookware.
Okay.
There are now many excellent alternatives to nonstick pans
Oh, cool.
that don't rely on PFAS.
That's good to know.
And when it comes to things like stain-resistant fabrics and carpets, try to choose options that are labeled as PFAS-free
Right.
or opt for natural materials whenever possible.
It sounds like a lot of it comes down to being a conscious consumer.
It is.
Doing our research,
Yes.
supporting companies that are making safer products and advocating for change.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It's about using our purchasing power to drive demand for products that are safe for both our health and the environment.
Right.
But it's not just about individual actions.
Oh?
We need systemic change as well.
What do you mean by systemic change? What would that look like?
We need stricter regulations on the production and use of PFAS.
Okay.
We need to phase out the most harmful types
Right.
and invest in the development and adoption of safer alternatives.
Gotcha.
We also need to hold polluters accountable for cleaning up contaminated sites and ensuring access to clean drinking water for everyone.
Right.
These are not individual battles.
Okay.
They require collective action.
So it's about raising our voices, demanding change, and holding our governments and industries accountable for the problem they created in the first place.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that this isn't just a personal health issue.
Okay.
It's a societal issue with far-reaching consequences.
Makes sense.
We need to push for policies that prioritize public health and environmental protection over corporate profits.
Right.
Supporting bans on the most dangerous PFAS and promoting the development and use of safer alternatives.
That makes a lot of sense, but I think there's still a lingering question for many listeners.
Yeah.
If these chemicals are so pervasive and difficult to avoid completely, what hope do we have for the long term?
It's true that PFAS are a complex problem with no easy solutions.
Yeah.
But this research shouldn't leave us feeling hopeless. It should empower us.
How so?
By understanding the risks, taking individual steps to reduce our exposure, and advocating for systemic change, we can create a healthier and safer future for ourselves and generations to come.
Right.
This research is not the end of the story.
Okay.
It's the beginning of a new chapter where we're equipped with knowledge and can demand better.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that perspective. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when faced with these kinds of challenges. But you're right, knowledge is power, and this study has certainly given us a lot to think about.
Absolutely. This research shouldn't be seen as a cause for despair, but as a call to action. It's a wake-up call that highlights the urgent need to address this issue on both an individual and societal level.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in tackling this PFAS problem?
Well, from a research standpoint, we need to delve deeper into the long-term health implications of PFAS exposure, especially for vulnerable populations like children and pregnant women.
Right.
We also need to develop more sophisticated tools for detecting and monitoring PFAS levels in our bodies and the environment.
It sounds like there's still a lot we don't know about these chemicals and their effects.
That's right. There are still many knowledge gaps that need to be filled. For example, we need to understand how different PFAS interact with each other in the body and how these interactions might influence their toxicity. We also need to investigate the potential for effective treatments or therapies to mitigate the damage caused by PFAS exposure.
And from a policy perspective, what needs to happen?
We need to see stricter regulations on the production, use, and disposal of PFAS, phasing out the most harmful types, and investing in the development and adoption of safer alternatives should be a top priority.
Okay.
Holding polluters accountable for cleaning up contaminated sites and ensuring access to clean drinking water for all communities is also crucial.
It seems like these changes require a significant shift in how we think about and regulate these chemicals.
It does. We need to move away from the reactive approach we've taken in the past, where we only address the problem after it's become widespread and cause significant harm.
Right.
We need to be more proactive in identifying and mitigating the risks posed by these chemicals before they become major public health threats.
So it's about prevention rather than just reaction.
Exactly. And that requires a collective effort from scientists, policymakers, industry leaders, and of course informed and engaged citizens like yourself.
This deep dive has been incredibly informative, and I have to say, a little bit eye-opening. I'm sure many of our listeners are feeling the same way. What would you say to someone who's feeling overwhelmed or even a little hopeless after learning about all of this?
I would say that while the situation is serious, it's not insurmountable. The science is clear. PFAS are a threat to our health and the environment. But we're not powerless in the face of this challenge. We now have a better understanding of the problem. And that understanding empowers us to act by taking individual steps to reduce our exposure. Supporting companies that are making safer products and advocating for systemic change, we can make a difference.
That's a powerful message. We can all play a role in creating a healthier and safer future for ourselves and future generations.
Precisely. It's about taking action, demanding better, and never losing sight of the fact that our collective health and well-being depend on it.
Well said. This has been a truly enlightening deep dive into the world of PFAS and their potential impact on our brains. We've covered a lot of ground, from the science behind the problem to the steps we can take to protect ourselves and advocate for change.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this journey of discovery.
And to you, our listener, thank you for diving in with us. We hope you found this exploration informative and empowering. Remember, knowledge is power. And now that you know more about the risks associated with PFAS, you can make more informed choices for yourself and your loved ones. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this thought, given what we now know about PFAS. How will this change your perspective on everyday products and the choices you make? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.